So today's topic is on the PDCA cycle, which is or the PDCA continuous improvement model. It stands for plan, do, check, and act, and it is a continuous loop. So what is a PDCA cycle? PDCA cycle is it's a process for continuously improving anything like products, people, services. It could be applied everywhere. It became an integral part of what is known today as lean management. How do we manage improvements? It's also a model that includes solutions testing, analyzing results, and improving the process. Most of us have been involved in problem solving or in continuous improvement projects before, but in some cases, it goes back to where it was. So what happens is maybe we did not plan properly, we did not execute according to plan, maybe, or we did not check any improvements. Or maybe even if we're checking improvements, maybe we're not responding to it, we're not acting if we're not meeting those or achieving those improvements. It's also focused on adding value. It starts with, for example, if we're doing some planning on what is the company's strategic plan, where are we there? What is the plan, say 5-year plan, 10-year plan, right? Or then we go to the long range planning, which goes down to the annual plan, and everything is we have to do the PDCA cycle on all those ones. We need to do planning and doing, checking, and acting. Goes all the way down to individual goals. If you notice on these ones, if we haven't met those ones, it loops back all the way to the company goals. So it starts from the company, a strategic planning all the way to individual goals, and if we don't meet those ones, it cycles around again. So how do we create that process? First is the planning. What do we want to see? What outcomes do we expect? What has to be done? And then how will we execute the task to achieve the outcome? This is where most of the time, this is where we spend a lot of time in planning. As well as what we all know, right? If we don't plan properly, then we're planning for failure. Doing is carrying out all the tasks as prescribed in our plan, in correct sequence and on time. Checking is, again, what were the outcomes? What were the results? How do we compare this to the plans? Did we achieve the plan? How well did the implementation work? Did we learn anything? How confident are we in our assumptions and the plan? If not, then we act on it. We revise the plan if we're not meeting those ones, or maybe even change the whole thing, right? But most importantly is after checking, we act on it if we're not meeting the targets. If so, then we move on and do the PDCA cycle all over again. So how it works is it's just like this. It's just like a wheel. We do the PDCA cycle, but how do we prevent it from going back down? What we need to do is we put a wedge, which in this case, we standardize the process. We put SOPs in place. We put work instructions in place, just so to prevent it from going back down or going back to where it was. So where can we use PDCA? We could use it on almost everything. When we're starting a new improvement project, when we're trying to develop a new or improved design or process, product or services, What about repetitive work processes? Doing some data collection. How do we make sure we have the correct data that we're collecting? How do we analyze those ones? Then, when we implement changes, and also working towards the continuous improvement plan. Uh, our day-to-day activities, our daily management, we could apply it there. Our problem-solving processes, and also on our KPIs or on our metrics. So it could be applied on everything, even into your day-to-day activities. Like, for example, last week we planned on going on vacation. So doing that is, what time do we plan on what time do we get to the airport? What do we do when we get in there to the place that we're going to, and so on, right? So we knew that there's going to be a long lineup, so we planned on going to the airport early, for example. That's what we did, and when we got there, unfortunately, there was no lineup because it was late in the night. So next thing, if next time, because it's a continuous process. Next time that we do that, if we're flying out late in the night, then we don't have to be there early, because some lessons learned. So this is an example on how do we apply this in a planning process. So on the left hand side, in this case, these ones were the business plan from, say, for example, from the strategic planning process that we did. So these ones were the ones that we wanted to apply for the year, for example. So from those ones, we do some breakouts, we do some projects for each one of those ones. What exactly do we need in there? We will have to assign a leader for sure, who's going to be leading the process, and how long. It's important in doing some planning. We need to have some target dates. How long do we have to complete this task? And we just need to keep updating it. Are we meeting it? Are we meeting our targets? So in this case, that's all planning. That's all planning, and this is all doing here on the top where we do the updates, and we check, are we meeting against our plan or not? If not, we'll have to redo it all over again. So that is the PDCA cycle. In our daily management in the production floor, while we have boards, what we do is, okay, we set targets for the year, for example, or for the day. How much do we want to achieve for the day? So in this case, the cross is for safety, E is for employee, then quality, production, and financials. So we will set targets. We will set targets. Checking is, are we meeting targets? For example, performing below the targets, then we need to act on that. We need to come up with action plans to make sure we go back to where the target or above the targets. So there's another example here on how we actually do that, which is the plan, do, check, and act, right? Obviously, in this case, if we're green, we're good. And if we're red, we're not meeting the targets. So we need to come up with action plans. In this case, it's all visuals. You check, everything is red. So we need to act on it and check why we're not meeting those targets. And then we do our problem solving after that. It's also focus on, again, we could use it on problem solving, where the first few part, again, where we have to clarify the problems, breaking down the problems, we set targets, analyze the root causes, and developing countermeasures. That's all part of the planning process. Doing is, okay, we put all this in place. Let's perform it. Let's see the countermeasures through. Checking is, Are they are they effective? Are those countermeasures effective or not? By looking at the results, looking at data, analyzing the data. And if not, we need to act on those ones. And then, as what continuous improvement is we need to make sure that we're not be satisfied with the actual results and continuously improve the process. And last but not the least, when we make those improvements, let's put some standards in place. Let's put some work instructions. Let's put some SOPs in place just to make sure it doesn't go back to where it was. Excuse me. On metrics, a lot of us use a lot of metrics, but how is it? This is how it works. Say, for example, this is just an example of a tree. Excuse me, a three-panel chart where we do the planning. In this case, the red the dotted line is the plan. We have to establish an objective, right? So downtime, for example, where ideal will be zero, but we all know there's we all know at the beginning we don't want to set it at zero because maybe it's just impossible. So we set it a little bit above that, which is again what is acceptable to the group, for example. So that's the planning part. Doing is looking at charting it now. How are we performing? Looking at the trend. How do we implement the process to deliver the plan that we said, okay, we want to achieve for example, a 2% downtime. How are we going to achieve that? Do we have PMs in place, for example? So that's all about planning. So when we look at the trend, are we seeing positive trends or it's just staying the way it was? So when we look at those trends, if we're not seeing any trends at all and still staying above or below the targets, then that is the checking part. But we need to break down what is causing all this. We need to monitor and evaluate the process. What's causing all that? Because in a lot of cases, not just one reason why we're seeing, in this case, downtime issues. So we need to check that. We need to monitor it and come up when we check it. Yes, we're still way above the downtime target that we have. What are we going to do? We need to come up with action plans now. So we apply all the action items on the outcome using the appropriate method. Again, when we act, we actually do the planning and doing checking again, which is the PDCA. That's why it's a continuous loop. Yeah, that is the end of our PDCA cycle. Just let me know if you have any questions.